South Africans that are living abroad will have an opportunity to register for the upcoming elections this week. The Independent Electoral Commission says the registration portal will be open from the 26th of January until the 28th of the same month. This comes as the country, of course, gears up for one of the most anticipated elections yet. For more on this, let's bring in IEC Chair Mosotho Moepya, who joins us in studio today, not via our video link. And it's great to have you on the program. So thanks very much indeed for making time. We speak about an online portal here, but I do wonder logistically what it takes to pull off something like this.
Well, the world is becoming a lot more complex, but the solutions are becoming, there's a multiplicity of solutions.
Right.
I can't imagine if we were doing this 10 years ago. We would be requiring to print thousands of forms, sending them to all of 120 missions abroad, and training people and relying on people to do exactly that. And then communicating with many South Africans who are spread across those 120 countries. One must remember that when we register South Africans abroad, we register them at our missions. In other words, our embassies, high commissions, and consulates. That's where we are limited to as South African territory. And so one would imagine that we would have to communicate with all of those citizens in those countries and yet get them to come to the mission. Today it's a little easier, but it requires a lot of work. We have to develop systems that would allow persons to register themselves. It enables people, the systems enable people to register online. We currently have that, and we are very grateful. And we can also communicate with South Africans who are abroad on the platforms, electronic platforms that they are using to communicate with our embassies, but also take out limited adverts in those countries. It has become more complex, but a lot easier in some respects than where we were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Electronic registration has proven very, very significant contribution in all of this.
And how safe is it? I mean, there's always a concern about, people being able to fake profiles, et cetera, et cetera. How confident are you that there aren't any of those kind of gaps that could, in some ways, put into question the contribution made by, South Africans living abroad?
We must be careful to never say never, but we build these things with incredible amount of care, and we take those things that concern you and I into account. But as you know, the cyberspace is a very difficult space, so we have to be cautious, but very optimistic that what we have prepared will in fact serve South Africans. We are very careful also to ensure that whilst you are registering, you're applying online, that your data is safeguarded. We have a lot of integrity that is put behind that process.
Yeah. And what do people need who are living outside the country to register?
Very important. They need an ID, a green barcoded ID card. The green barcoded ID book. It's one option. They can have a smart ID card as another option. If they don't have that, they can have a temporary ID. It's just one of those, not all three of them. And then they need, very importantly, a valid passport. If you don't have a valid passport, I'm afraid you are not meeting the legislative requirements for you to be registered outside of the Republic.
Sure.
That's all you need, and then you can go online and you can register.
Sure. And in the past, how responsive typically are South Africans who are living abroad to our elections? I mean, of course, there's a lot of interest here at home, even though I'm sure you and I will speak a bit more about how we can increase our voter turnout.
Yes.
But just as a general note, do you find that South Africans living abroad typically take notice of what's taking place here and want to participate in our democracy?
Yes, they do. Increasingly, South African political parties are no longer just campaigning here at home. they're also campaigning abroad. And so they are raising their profile. And, with our missions abroad, one of their, I guess, key performance area in this period of time is, informing South Africans about the opportunities that exist for them to participate in our democracy back home. And so they have many avenues of contact and information that tells them about getting ready and, registering and voting for, in these elections coming.
Yeah. Of course, it's much easier to do so in countries that aren't facing any kind of turbulence, and I don't know which country that is, quite frankly, given the times we're in. But, there's, for example, massive protests in Berlin. I'm thinking of South Africans who might be in Gaza, those in Riyadh, those who might be in Afghanistan, for an example. Those are just the places that are coming to mind. It's difficult to think of alternatives for those who want to participate in this democratic process there. But I'm sure as the IEC, you've got a bit of a concern or an interest in ensuring that there is some kind of option, whatever that option is.
Well, I must say it pains us when there is this kind of turmoil we see. I can only hope that this kind of problems have resolutions, as soon as is possible. We will take steps, in the best way that we can to provide opportunities for South African citizens. We have been communicating with our missions extensively. We are providing a lot of support to persons that would want to register online, because that's the safest, easiest way of doing it. You can do it in the privacy of your home, in your office, wherever you are. And so we think that support we must provide. But we are also mindful of the fact that there may be South Africans, and in fact there are, who would prefer to come to our missions. And so we are preparing for those. For the ones who are in places like Gaza, and my heart goes out to them. I'm really of the view that they should, as far as is possible, register online immediately, and let's see how best we can help them to do so. If they are struggling to do it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Chair, it'd be remiss of me not to ask you of some of the other issues that I think are top of mind when it comes to our elections this year, given just how unprecedented these times are. There's been a lot of talk, for example, about whether or not a certain organization, let me just say, the MK party, will be able to contest under their current name. I think there's threats of some kind of litigation. I'm not sure as we speak if any of that has happened. But it's a story I'm sure that you're also watching quite closely. As things stand, though, in the absence of that litigation, is the party in good standing to contest the elections? Well,
MK is a registered political party. You will recall that in South Africa, the Electoral Commission is the registrar of political parties as well. They are registered with us. We have had an objection to their registration. We have dealt with that. It did not succeed. We currently have a court application before us in the Electoral Court on the same matter. The court is seized with that matter, and so I think let us give the court an opportunity to deal with it. But equally, we have another court application that is in the High Court in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban. High Court, the division of the High Court there. I think the courts will deal with these matters, and we will take the cue from them. But as things stand, if there were no court applications before us, MK is registered, they would be able to contest elections.
Right. There's been also questions about, for example, there's a particular person who's mentioned that they're running for president, right? Which is not what we're used to in our country, right? Because people vote for political parties, and the president is elected by parliament. In the lead up to this, there's also been a lot of discussions about whether or not we can get into a space where independent candidates appear in that way on the ballot. As far as I understand, that's not necessarily going to happen this year, despite word from the Constitutional Court, etc., etc.
Well, I don't want to presume. I think, independents will in my view, contest because the law provides for them to contest as such. But you're correct. We're not, in our country at the moment, our electoral system is not one where you raise your hand and say, I'm now submitting my candidature as a president of the Republic of South Africa. The president is elected from members of parliament who are elected, the 400. And once the president has been elected, there's a vacancy for one member because the president then is no longer a member of parliament. And so in these elections, 2024, we are not having a presidential candidate elected directly by citizens. He or she will be elected by the 400 members that are in parliament.
It also feels like it's unprecedented, this election, because of the number of political parties that are contesting. Do we have a figure yet? I, from this chair, every now and again speak about a different political party, and I think anybody who's watching will be forgiven if they have lost count. But as things stand, does the IEC have a consolidated list of what that ballot paper might look like?
Two very important things to say at this point. We have just under 600 political parties registered. In other words, available to contest an election. But reality has taught us, our short history of 30 years, has taught us that registering as a political party and contesting an election and fielding candidates, paying a deposit, campaigning, those are two different things. We don't know how many of the 600 parties or so will in fact contest. Remember, the size of the ballot on this occasion is not only dependent on the amount of political parties registered, it is also dependent on the number of independent candidates that will contest the election. So we do expect that this development will eventually lead to a longer ballot paper. And that's really something that worries us, something that we need to manage, and something that one must balance. For you to have a credible, a free and fair election, this also plays a part. Voters must be in a position where they can easily relate to candidates, know who they are voting for, and know where to find that person on the ballot. If the ballot is significantly long, if it is unwieldy because it's long, it's very complicated, that can in fact imperil an election, and we have to guard against that.
Precisely. The question is how, right? I wonder if there's any kind of legal framework that might allow you to, I don't know, put some kind of threshold there, because you're absolutely right. I mean, logistically, I cannot imagine there being a list of more than 600 items on any ballot. There's time considerations, there's the printing costs, there's all kinds of issues. I mean, if anybody has voted, I'm sure they know that even that space is a bit confined. So how would you deal with that?
I think we have to learn from lessons that other territories have traversed. I remember in 2006, I worked in an election in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There was a ballot, one of the ballots that had 902 candidates. You certainly don't want to see that. I imagine South Africans are used to having a ballot paper that is manageable. I think if we present them with something like that, we are in serious trouble. And so I'm not, speaking badly about another country. I'm just bringing that lesson back to our own territory. In that country, citizens expected that. They knew, for many years they haven't heard, and for them they just wanted to have. It was almost like our 1994. Our citizens are used to a very short ballot paper, one page. If you are going to present them with 902 candidates, I'm saying as an example, I think you are going to create a situation where by the time we need to close stations, for example, the queue would be very long, and voting would be taking too long, and so on and so forth. When that affects people and they then go back home, someone can come back and say, you know what, because of what has happened, it was taking too long, people were discouraged, this can't be free, this can't be fair, and so on and so forth. So that's the challenge. And one way of managing that challenge in law is to not, remove or, hamper people participating by making the requirements quite steep. But the opposite is also true. You can't make them just so easy. So there is a question of balance that we are really talking to. And some of that, or some of the ingredients in that equation are before the courts. The courts are being asked to say, don't make it too difficult, But on the other hand, we must say to the courts, we understand, but if you make it too easy, you might not just have an election that's credible.
Sure. Very important work you have to do, unenviable position that you're in, but you've certainly done it before, and something suggests you might be able to do it again. The chairperson of the IEC is Mosotho Moepya. Thanks very much indeed for speaking with us. We appreciate your time and your indulgence. All right.